Okay, William. So the next one, a little bit generic as well, the regulation of racing throughout the centuries.
Yeah, obviously it's very important for the courses, like any other business really, reacting to legislation both within and outside racing, from outside racing. And in fact, a strange, if whether my books sell well or are ever remembered or just largely burnt. One of the distinctions I suppose I can claim is that my the book Strongholds of Satan was quoted in Parliament on the recent debate on gambling that they held in Westminster Hall, quoted by David Mundell, my own MP, and by the Minister. Fat lot of good it did, I'm afraid, because there is in the front of each volume a chapter. I've written a short chapter on the regulation of racing because, as I say, it's important for the courses. Um, because racing was the national sport, it was the local holiday, and it was the local chance to drink and gamble. And of course, people can win or lose a lot of money. Um, and we don't want to go into the whys and wherefores of the present government's bill, but or intentions. But history. There are three views of history. There's Henry Ford. History is bunkum. Or you can have the one that those who don't know the history are destined to repeat it. Or what was attributed to Mark Twain, which he probably didn't say it, the history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. And I think it will be of interest, because it's such a current topic for people, to just go through quickly the various rules and regulations that have been applied to racing over the centuries. The first legislation actually about racing, the first legislation about breeding was Henry VIII forbade any stallion under 15 hands to be let loose and cover mares in the wild because he wanted to increase the size of horses. But the first, in terms of race courses, was in 1654. The Commonwealth government, on a year-by-year basis, forbade race meetings, not because they really disapproved of racing. In fact, Cromwell was quite a supporter in many ways, and his son, Tumbledown Dick, actually supported races at Winchester, but they were worried that the wrong people were gathering and it would be sedition would be planned. And we'll talk maybe a bit more about that in a minute. But the real effect, the racing exploded over the time of the Stuart Restoration, and of course, famously, Queen Anne was one of the sort of people who founded Ascot. And but it was in her reign the government first started to get nervous about gambling, and in 1711 introduced what was called a Qui Tam Act, a Whosoever Act. And there was a class of act. So whoever does this, whosoever does that, is committing an offence or does something. And that made bets over £10 recoverable in law to double the amount. So if you bet £20 and failed to pay, the person could claim £20 from you, and so on and so forth. And they hoped this would put people off gambling because of the potential debt they would actually legally have to recover. Before then, it was a debt of honour. Um, it did anything but. People were very happy to gamble, and the bookmakers, such as they were called blacklegs. They were individual people. They were very, very happy to take the money. So, in fact, he did nothing. And again, the number of meetings recorded by Cheney, who did the first calendar in 1727, is going up and up and up until the government in the second half of the 1730s, using private members' bills, actually, introduced a number of acts in order to regulate gambling, both on the racecourse and in roulette or faro, all different sorts of gambling. And the racing one was the last one, introduced in 1739 to come into force in June 1740, that made every race have to be worth £50. And if you didn't achieve that level, you were out. You had to stop the meeting, and you could be fined £200, enormous sum of money. Talking about, well, probably about £80,000 now, equivalent fine for doing it. Half to go to a local charity, half to the informer. Now, despite the fines being pretty swingeing, and it did clear out a lot of meetings, there are meetings still going on pretty soon after that that weren't obeying the rules. First one I found, I think, is in Penistone in the West Riding of Yorkshire in about 1743. And of course, straight away, and this is, one of the examples of why this latest legislation of the government will fail, is that people started finding ways around it. Yes, the races were worth £50, but then you had to give £10 to for the drums, £10 for the bells, £10 to the clerk of the course, and lo and behold, you end up with a fiver by the end of it. And that was just one of the ways in which they avoided the law. In fact, the law became so ill used, I mean, just not used at all. It just withered on the vine. It had rather a strange postscript because in the 1820s, there was a meeting at Rochdale, which is going to be in volume 4, on Bagslit Moor. And it was a lovely round course, and in the volume there will be a lovely drone picture of it. You can still see it after all these years. Last raced on in the 1840s. But the man called Edge found this old law and thought that he would gain himself a quick £100. So he saw this race taking place at Rochdale for nothing near £50. Got the owner of the runner-up, subpoenaed him, and took the organisers of Rochdale races to court, and at the next Rochdale assizes. Now, the case wasn't defended, but a very rowdy crowd turned up, and the judge realised that if he wanted a courtroom rather at the end of all this, he better find some way of seeing Edge off. So Edge, got his witnesses, all seemed to be going absolutely swimmingly, and Edge was about to win, and the judge said, "Mr. Edge, was the winner in question, was it a stallion or a gelding?" And Mr. Edge said, "I don't know. Case non-suited. You're out." And there was much mirth in court, and that was the last case brought under that act. And the Duke of Portland, I think it was, a few years later, had it struck off the statute book. So betting continued apace, and the next thing is that going back again, if you remember the 1711 law, bets are recoverable in law. By the 1840s, the government had enough of this because courts were getting clogged up with cases, and so in 1843, I think it was, not only did it outlaw all sorts of different gambling and betting in public, but it made all debts a matter of honour again, took them off the statute book. And that was the case until 2005. And I'll never to this day understand why the government made bets recoverable in law. To me, that would solve quite a lot of the betting problem if you couldn't recover your money in law. But a bookmaker can, in theory at least, recover their money in law. But the government outlawed that in 1840. Now, with the advent of with the railways and these crowds of people that were going to race meetings, particularly around London, were getting very, very disreputable. People were getting mugged, and lots of letters in the Times in the 1870s. And approaching this time, the Jockey Club realised that if they didn't do something, the government were going to do something. And so the power of the Jockey Club is quite an interesting thing in its own way, really. The Jockey Club power came by osmosis. The Jockey Club originally, or was refounded in the 1750s, and really set out to control the heath. But very, very quickly, even by 1757, from the Curragh, for example, people were asking the Jockey Club to make decisions for them on the rules, because stewards were just local good worthies at most courses. So they wouldn't understand the finer points of the rules, and so they would ask the Jockey Club. And the Jockey Club eventually, I think in 1832, said that if you don't obey our rules, we're not going to adjudicate for you anymore, because they got fed up with people coming to them saying, "Look, we want you to decide this." They would decide it. This would be an uncomfortable decision locally. I don't know, someone who'd sponsored a race or helped build the course or something. So they wouldn't enact what the Jockey Club had said. So the Jockey got fed up with this. And this gave the Jockey Club great power. But they didn't legally control anybody. But in 1870, they said, if you want to be on our race courses, the races had to be worth £50 without deduction, before deductions, after deductions, rather. And they shortly increased that by the end of 76 to £100 per race. And this was what started a lot of the park meetings. park, meaning to empark, to enclose. So you get Sandown Park, Kempton Park, etc., being founded in this decade, and open meetings like Newton Heath going to Haydock Park, Newcastle Town Moor going to Gosforth Park, etc., because the courses either had to raise this money or they were out. It was flapping. And if your horse ran at a flapping meeting, you couldn't run on one of their race courses. So this was a jockey club exercising its power, but still, a man called Anderson in 1878, the Anderson Act, he was an MP in Glasgow who didn't actually have a racecourse in his constituency, but was very sort of morally guided. And he made every course within 12 miles of London um, uh, get a license. And number of courses failed to get a license. It depended on the local magistrates. And that is when, for example, the Croydon racecourse, which was quite successful, moved out of the sphere of influence of the London magistrates and went to Gatwick. And that's why Gatwick racecourse was founded. And ever since then, really, legislation, there was also, all during this time, a tax on racehorses. So if you had a racehorse, you paid a racehorse tax. And the government put on an entertainment tax. And of course, Winston Churchill, infamously in the 1930s, introduced an entertainment tax. Sorry, in the 1920s. But he also allowed the introduction of the tote in 1928. And then, of course, the government, the next thing of the government was the 63 levy, the foundation of the levy board in 61, and the permitting of betting off course in 1963, where racing, of course, made the huge mistake of not getting enough for its product, which we suffer from today. The government is now having, as we know, having another go at trying to limit people's losses in gambling. And I think, just what we've said in the last 5 minutes have demonstrated all been complete failures.